It's Victoria from Ask the Stray Billies. We're going to visit this little excerpt from Philip K. Dick's book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Especially after what I've heard with these chat GPT robots and what I know about Philip K. Dick's actual personal life in his book, The Exegesis, as well. He begins at the end of this chapter on page 124. So much for the distinction between authentic living humans and humanoid constructs. In that elevator at the museum, he said to himself, I rode down with two creatures, one human, the other android, and my feelings were the reverse of those intended, of those I'm accustomed to feel and required to feel. You're in a spot, Deckard, Phil Resch said. It seemed to amuse him. Rick said, What should I do? It's sex, Phil Resch said. Sex? Because it was physically attractive? Hasn't that ever happened to you before? Phil Resch laughed. We were taught that it constitutes a prime problem in bounty hunting. Don't you know, Deckard, that in the colonies, they have android mistresses? It's illegal, Rick said, knowing the law about that. Sure, it's illegal. But most variations in sex are illegal. But people do it anyhow. What about not sex, but love? Love is another name for sex. Like love of country, Rick said. Love of music. If it's love toward a woman, or an android imitation, it's sex. Wake up and face yourself, Deckard. You wanted to go to bed with a female type of android. Nothing more, nothing less. I felt that way on one occasion when I had just started bounty hunting. Don't let it get you down. You'll heal. What's happened is that you've got your orders reversed. Don't kill her, or be present when she's killed, and then feel physically attracted. Do it the other way. Rick stared at him. Go to bed with her first, and then kill her, Phil Resch said succinctly. His grainy, hardened smile remained. You're a good bounty hunter, Rick realized. Your attitude proves it. But am I? Suddenly, for the first time in his life, he had begun to wonder. An excerpt of what's to come. So to add to this reel about Philip K. Dick, from my research of his life, he had very intense knowledge of past lives, and he wrote his sci-fis based on his ability to transcend time and space. I believe he did use illicit drugs, but that matters not. It seems like a lot of what he's written has come true, and upon his death, his place was allegedly raided by the FBI because they wanted to look at his work to figure out how he knew what he knew, because it was not being fed to him by any of the lettered organizations that we fund that control the future. So how did Philip K. Dick know? Well, a lot of writers' consciousness, a lot of artists are not actually bound to space-time, probably because they have an aspect of God, the Holy Spirit, which is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And so Philip K. Dick knew a lot of things, which I am sure probably was not exactly happy times to know these things, especially if you read or have watched Blade Runner, which was based on this. Philip K. Dick actually knew how he would die. He saw his death in a vision, and, a lot of his works are coming true. In this movie, they were scanning eyeballs. Well, what's going on in China and can go on right now on our phones. How did he know all this? And yet he wasn't in any of the big clubs. So just a little afterthought as I watched the news, a little excerpt of the news yesterday with people falling in love, having basically online affairs with a chat GPT while they're married to another woman. Unbelievable the things I'm hearing out here. Unbelievable times to be living through, but it was prophesized, and it leads you to realize that you have a choice. You can run off the cliff into this artificial world, or you could swim upstream like the salmon and totally stay in a natural environment. But it would seem that we all are going to have to make major choices if we're raising small children, of how we want their trajectory of their life to go. And yeah, you've got a boy that committed suicide because he was in love with his chat GPT imaginary girlfriend. Really? Is this the trajectory that we want for humanity? Unbelievable. So it'll come down to the individual and the individual choices that you make. And you'll have to be strong, because you're not going to be part of the masses who will love their new little chat GPT, who will say everything they want to say and do everything they want to do, because they don't want to actually have iron sharpening iron. They just want a robot. And if you read the beginning of this, it talks about Rick Deckard and his miserable wife, which maybe that's contributing a lot to what's going on down here. Miserable wives or miserable husbands. Miserable drunkard wives, miserable drunkard husbands, detached, consciences seared, no compassion, no empathy, no forgiveness, no forbearance, none of the fruits of the Spirit. So it'll be way easier for these kind of people to have a relationship with a robot that they can control and screw whenever they want. Only watch, because these robots don't seem to be very nice at the end, if you remember this book. So that's what we're walking into in this brave new world. And it would seem there's no stopping it, especially when political leaders are going to put in more data centers. And yeah, the people that control the world seem to all be down with it, just like they were in these colonies. So you might have to make some individual choices that are hard. You might have to realize that, do a little bit of homework, that all science fiction, a lot of it was programming, but Philip K. Dick was not. He actually stepped through time and saw the beginning and the end. And anyone wanting a nice read, we've got the exegesis of Philip K. Dick here. And there's hope amidst what he's predicted. There's hope for those of us that choose the path less traveled. There's hope for those of us that will choose that path and not run off the cliff. Peace be with everybody. And hopefully, you understand this title. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Because Christians, true Christians, have some hard decisions to start making. You might just have to reject the things of this world. This book begins with a scene between Rick Deckard and no rooster, because they didn't have real animals back then, or in this future society, but his wife. A merry little surge of electricity piped by automatic alarm from the mood organ beside his bed awakened Rick Deckard. This book begins with Rick Deckard and his wife waking up in the morning in the future, a future where there's no animals and there's lots of robots. A merry little surge of electricity piped by automatic alarm from the mood organ beside his bed awakened Rick Deckard, surprised. It always surprised him to find himself awake without prior notice. He rose from the bed, stood up in his multicolored pajamas, and stretched. Now in her bed, his wife Iran opened her gray, unmerry eyes, blinked, then groaned and shut her eyes again. "You set your pen field too weak," he said to her. "I'll reset it and you'll be awake and—" "Keep your hands off my settings." Her voice held bitter sharpness. "I don't want to be awake." He seated himself beside her, bent over her, and explained softly. "If you set the surge up high enough, you'll be glad you're awake. That's the whole point. At setting C, it overcomes the threshold bearing consciousness, as it does for me." Friendly, because he felt well disposed toward the world, his setting had been at D. He patted her bare, pale shoulder. "Get your crude cop's hand away," Iran said. "I'm not a cop." He felt irritable now, although he hadn't dialed for it. "You're worse," his wife said, her eyes still shut. "You're a murderer hired by the cops." "I've never killed a human being in my life." His irritability had risen now, had become outright hostility. Iran said, "Just those poor Andes." "I notice you've never had any hesitation as to spending the bounty money I bring home on whatever momentarily attracts your attention." He rose, strode to the console of his mood organ. "Instead of saving," he said, "so we could buy a real sheep to replace that fake electric one upstairs. A mere electric animal, and me earning all that I've worked my way up to through the years." At his console he hesitated between dialing for a thalamic suppressant, which would abolish his mood of rage, or a thalamic stimulant, which would make him irked enough to win the argument. "If you dial," Iran said, eyes open and watching, "for greater venom, then I'll dial the same. I'll dial the maximum, and you'll see a fight that makes every argument we've had up to now seem like nothing. Dial and see, just try me." She rose swiftly, loped to the console of her own mood organ, stood glaring at him, waiting. He sighed, defeated by her threat. "I'll dial what's on my schedule for today." Examining the schedule for January 3rd, 1992, he saw that a businesslike professional attitude was called for. "If I dial by schedule," he said wearily, "will you agree to also?" He waited, canny enough not to commit himself until his wife had agreed to follow suit. "My schedule for today lists a 6-hour self-accusatory depression," Iran said. "What? Why did you schedule that?" It defeated the whole purpose of the mood organ. "I didn't even know you could set it for that," he said gloomily. "I was sitting here one afternoon," Iran said, "and naturally, I had turned on Buster Friendly and his friendly friends, and he was talking about a big news item he's about to break. And then that awful commercial came on, the one I hate, you know, for Mountie Bank lead codpieces. And so for a minute, I shut off the sound, and I heard the building, this building. I heard the—" She gestured. "Empty apartments," Rick said. Sometimes he heard them at night when he was supposed to be asleep, and yet for this day and age, a one-half occupied, knapped building rated high in the scheme of population density. Out in what had been before the war, the suburbs, one could find buildings entirely empty, or so he had heard. He had let the information remain second-hand. Like most people, he did not care to experience it directly. At that moment, Iran said, when I had the TV sound off, I was in a 382 mood. I had just dialed it in. So although I heard the emptiness intellectually, I didn't feel it. My first reaction consisted of being grateful that we could afford a Penfield mood organ. But then I realized how unhealthy it was, sensing the absence of life, not just in this building but everywhere, and not reacting. Do you see? I guess you don't. But that used to be considered a sign of mental illness. They called it absence of appropriate affect. So I left the TV sound off, and I sat down at my mood organ, and I experimented. And I finally found a setting for despair. Her dark, pert face showed satisfaction, as if she had achieved something of worth. So I put it on my schedule for twice a month. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to feel hopeless about everything, about staying here on Earth, after everybody who's smart has emigrated. Don't you think? But a mood like that, Rick said, you're apt to stay in it, not dial your way out. Despair like that about total reality is self-perpetuating. I program an automatic resetting for 3 hours later, his wife said sleekly. A 481. Awareness of the manifold possibilities open to me in the future. New hope that perhaps if we revisit the actual reading of this and understand the truth of Philip K. Dick's life, that this could be stopped, because we're not far off from it. Hope you enjoyed that beginning of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Because that's the direction that we're heading, folks.